Welcome to my second crack at Kansas City, Missouri. The first video was released about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. It was a condensed version. What I've got for you in this video is quite a larger file of many of the locations in Kansas City that weren't on that first video. And some that were, of course. Interesting Kansas City, right on the border between the state of Kansas and Missouri. Missouri, a very interesting area, old world-wise. St. Louis is a spectacular old world city. I've done St. Joseph. I've done Topeka. A lot of the surrounding area. We're seeing a lot of red brick multi-storied structures, a lot of mud flood evidence in this area. In Kansas City, an interesting population demographic growth here. We're going from next to nothing, 4,000 comparatively, to within 30 years, 130,000 people. You can see the percentage of population growth. A city that grows at that rate would be a chaotic mess, you would think. So I think, again, we're looking at a reset population, a resetting of civilization, and a rediscovering of what was once there after cataclysm and potential mud flood effects of the area. And why do I suggest such a thing? Well, we look at these early photographs and you're seeing the mode of transportation here with the horse and buggy, and you're seeing these multi-storied brick structures, decoratively ornate. And if we look a little closer, you can see what we might call frivolous in the modern day to design such a building in such a way. But at a time period where you're looking at a city really just trying to put itself together, it doesn't make sense to see construction like this. So right away we say there's something seriously wrong with this historical narrative. We see some of these early photographs of Kansas City buried in mud, like they're digging themselves up from the mud. I'm not sure what to make of some of these. But one of those cities, this is a pretty bad photograph, apologies. One of those cities similar to Seattle, where you have this digging out from under the mud and the creation of a city in very, very short periods of time. And again, you're looking at, does this look like a city that's only been around for, 30, 35 years? Or does it look like it's possibly a lot older than we're being told about history? To my eye, these are looking, everything here looking much older. You can see the wear on the streets. You can see the streetcar tracks looking like they've been a part of the infrastructure for quite some time. And that's why we ask questions, and we do question the narrative here on this channel. And we encourage you to do the same. So according to the conventional historical narrative, Kansas City really taking shape as a result of its geography, located at the confluence of two major rivers, the Kansas and the Missouri rivers. Apparently visited by Lewis and Clark in the early 1800s. Eventually the Mormons come through there. Joseph Smith starts a settlement, but they get run out. And we have the likely story of what we always see with so many of these North American cities, especially in the States, that nothing really going on population-wise, a very slow development until after the American Civil War. And we saw that in the population demographics for Kansas City. An exponential growth, literally exponential growth of the city immediately after the American Civil War. And I always find that interesting because all these locations seem to sprout in growth, but what about all the people that were lost during the American Civil War? You know, it's like the population and the way that it changes so dramatically doesn't make a lot of sense. You think there would have been a big drop-off, but really what we're seeing is a massive spike in population and development. So you're looking at a generation of able-bodied men. Some estimates say up to 850,000 men, or people, I should say, killed in the American Civil War, or so the story goes. Yet you get all this development taking place across the continent immediately after the struggle. There's something very, very fishy about the American Civil War story, and we are sifting through that in this field of research. Looking at the Aladdin Hotel, said to have been built in 1925, and very interesting, beautiful looking brickwork, or ornate. Certainly don't build them like this anymore. So many of these massive multi-storied structures that you're seeing these postcards of early 1900s, and these things looking to have been around for quite some time. So that narrative again, where not really anything going on until the 1870s, and then a massive spike in population. Not fitting what we're seeing in a lot of these visuals. We have the interior of the Baltimore Hotel, just to give you a sense of how these places were decorated. Okay, this is one of the major structures that's worth focusing in on, the Board of Trade building. Of course, digging into the histories on these locations can be a little bit confusing. It says here the old Board of Trade Exchange building would be put to rest in 1887, and then the architect's competition would be submitted to build the new structure. And again, a likely story, because 1887 you begin a competition, then all of a sudden you award the contract after the competition closes, and you start building, and this place is ready to go by 1888. Burnham and Brute, Daniel Burnham, I've done a video on him, one of those what I consider to be founded architect, one of that founding process. I don't think he was responsible for these structures. I think these were there, a part of the old world, and they've been reclaimed. Of course, this has been demolished in 1968. What a tragedy to have demolished such a structure. You can see here, nearing its final days, looking like it's boarded up, ready for the wrecking ball. Just take a look at the curved brickwork on this thing. It's absolutely spectacular. We're being led to believe that this was built in 1888, when the city of Kansas City was being flooded with new arrivals, and they were putting structures like this up. You have to really ask the question, why on earth do they tear them down? They're magnificent. The Board of Trade building is certainly worth a closer look. You can see here, these brick faces look to be curved. They are not a rectangular bricks made to make the shape of a curve, but they're actually curved themselves. It's impeccable brickwork, and I think I know why this thing had to be torn down. Spectacular structure. And interesting, remember Kansas City existing along that border. We have some from the Kansas side, County Courthouse and City Hall, and some structures from the Missouri side. In the foreground here, you're looking at the post office. This is a phantom building. I have a lot of trouble finding any information on this, when it was built, when it was torn down. If you can find anything, please throw that in the comment section. I'd like to know more about this. This one makes an appearance in one of my books on demolished buildings, but not much information, again, buried in time. And so many of these not celebrated, but hidden, which makes the process again quite suspicious. Now we're looking at a very, very large multi-storied structure said to have been built in 1907, the Commerce Trust Company building. I think it did go by several names over time, but there are quite a few of these in Kansas City as well. Keep rolling through because we have a fairly large file for you, but so many of these old world looking structures. Multiple hotels shooting up with very little information as to how long it took, among other things. We have a carnival park. We have the chutes. You see these in a lot of cities at the early 1900s. Eventually these things not making it really into the 30s, a lot of them being torn down. I would say this one probably in that category, although I could find no other information on it. The Athletic Club, 1923, we are being told. There's so many stone structures. brick and stone. And I'll just keep rolling through for you. I really like to include as many visuals as I can into one package, and that's a purpose of a lot of these videos, and maybe you watching this can use it as a launch pad for your research if you're interested in this in the old world. And of course I always invite locals to add their flavor to the story. And sometimes I get people angry at my approach, and the intention's not really to anger you. I guess it does ruffle feathers when you question the narrative and you're anchored to the conventional narrative as your form of history. This one's strange. Shrine Mosque. Nowhere to be found. If you're seeing in postcard form in this presentation, it's likely because I wasn't able to find a photograph, which again means a lot of them have been disappeared from history. But I would like to speak a little bit about holding on to conventional narratives. So you're using the historical societies and the record keepers as an anchor point for your version of history, or for the version of history. And what we're suggesting in this research and on this channel is that we have come to realize we can't trust a lot of the conventional historical narrative that's been handed down to us. I'm not saying that everyone who recorded history was in on a lie or a deception, but I think the anchor points, the power structure, all start at that point, and then what we have down through time is a perpetuation of the deception until it becomes what we think of as truth. And now we're living in a time, I think, where these lies are being uprooted, and along all sorts of different fields, not just in the field of architecture and history, but in every different aspect. And we're really learning that we need to question our reality in general. Here it is. They're calling it the government building, but that's the post office. You can see the lower levels here. So you can tie this in with what we call the mud flood. In this field of research, I think the mud flood being a part of a massive cataclysm or series of cataclysms that occurred here, that wiped out a previous civilization or devastated a previous civilization. Perhaps there was an attempt to take over what was once there. Maybe there were remnants of the previous civilization that were taken out. Maybe a lot of these wars in our history were actually the usurping of the old world and the destroying of what once was there and the memory of it. Of course, it's all speculation, but I think we have dug deep enough into the research to see that there's definitely something going on inconsistent with what we're being told. So we know that there are lies. We have been told lies, and we have been misdirected. And a lot of this has been hidden and buried. And personally, I think seeking the truth is a noble venture, and I think it's important, and I think it's healthy for us. I think holding on to the lie for the sake of stability is a dangerous proposition. It puts us into the hands of the those that maintain that lie, let's say. So many different churches and structures. Again, we don't build this way in the modern day, and I think there's a reason for it. I don't think we can, or if we can, it's a monumental feat to even come close to something like this. The materials themselves make no sense at a time where transportation was in its infancy, we are being told. I think we're looking at the remnants of a much deeper established civilization. And then again, we have a false history grafted onto the old history. This is the old city hall. Again, a ghost of a building. You can see the timeline here. This thing only stood for 46 years. And unfortunately, I could not find a good photograph of this structure. Here we can see it from the front in drawing form. This courthouse, we'll look at that shortly as well. But a spectacular structure, and why on earth would you tear this down after 40 years? I think I know why. Okay. Of course I speculate. We have a Cliff Drive section of Kansas City with some very interesting rock formations. It gets into what I consider to be post-cataclysm. Are we looking at natural phenomenon, or are we looking at the remains of structure that have gone through some sort of catastrophic event involving heat, current, electricity? Not sure. All of these things are on the table, but I think, again, we are getting closer to realizing that something devastated the realm in which we inhabit. This is the club building. Very ornately detailed. Beautiful. Again, these looking like some sort of receiving device for energy. That's it in postcard form. The old club building. We can see again all the brick paved streets are, so we do expect that all this was done, between 1870 and 1900, 30-year period of massive overhaul of infrastructure. And if so, where are the old photographs of that? There's no evidence of it, really. The original convention hall, very stone-like, beautiful columns, and then we have a secondary structure where it looks like they've revamped the lower portion and then filled in the column section up here. Interesting. The country club, apparently, because it's easy to build country clubs. This reminding me of something I've seen in San Diego, part of the Balboa Park. Very interesting. Would love to take a stroll through there. Alright, now we get to the courthouse. And I do have a short write-up here, looking like the timeline on this courthouse matching the city hall that we saw. 1892, impressive new courthouse is built here. It says new one's built in 1935, and then this one's torn down sometime in this time period. Although no one can be sure when it was torn down. So we're given a 40-year timeline on this, and we do have visual evidence of there either having been a tower, central tower, or it was part of the design and was never made. You be the judge as to what happened there. We do know that towers have been removed from many of these old world structures. But again, this is the type of thing that should not be difficult to search for. This should be something that I had no trouble finding, and there should be much more evidence of its existence and much more documentation. Because as you can see, this is not something we really do in the modern day. A spectacular structure, built in 1892, we're told. The Fidelity National Bank building, in the Art Deco styling, built in the Art Deco styling, we'll be told. We have a construction photo here, for what it's worth. Maybe, I don't know. I thought I'd throw it in there for you. And an old shot now of Kansas City. They're saying before everything was regraded, so massive regrading going on, we're told, with Kansas City. Again, that mud flood aspect. Really like these old Sharpie photographs that you can zoom right in on. It retains its resolution. It's really spectacular. We'll keep going. Just some shots of old world Kansas City for you. And what is she thinking? What is he thinking? He's thinking he's going to make a pretty penny. He's got himself in a decent position, but he has no idea how this was built. We have that electric park, lit up like a Christmas tree. In Kansas City, supposedly the pass-through point for 3 of the major trails in the early days of America. Here's some of the Elks gentlemen. Let's take a closer look. Are these gentlemen fine upstanding citizens of the community? I have a bit of a gangster feel. I don't want to be judgmental, but so apparently the Santa Fe Trail, the California Trail, and the Oregon Trail all pass through this region. And I suggest a lot of that fiction turned into fact. I'm not saying it's all fiction, but I think the open plains of emptiness, as far as civilization goes, is fiction, and I think there was a rediscovering of the realm going on. This is the Emery Bird Thayer store. And you can see how spectacular these things really are. The circular brick columns, the sort of Richardsonian style column capitals. You see these a lot across the continent as well. Really amazing. So I think the greatness of America goes back into the old world. And I think the New World deception has been cast over our perception to paint us as humans, and the way we treat each other, in a negative light, and to give us a false perception of who and what we really are. Here we have the First National Bank. Apparently it's a library in the modern day. Hidden Truth, the YouTube channel, does some great boots on the ground in Kansas City. He does one on this structure, as well as the structure across the street, the New England National Bank. The modern structure having brick above, but apparently it used to look like this. And in his video he features, I'll put the link in the description, he features these massive metal doors.
And right behind me is the building. It says at the top over the entrance, New England National Bank. And I'm going to turn around. And this building is right across from the historic library. But the door is really incredible. I want to give you an idea of how high it is. 6 feet is right about to the bottom of that circle on the door. And you can see how high that goes in the basement. And the interesting thing about the door on it is it looks like it originally had doors like that also. Well, they're still there, but that the inner part, the ones that they utilize now, are just makeshift doors that were put there later, because these doors are the same, and I would say that they're even taller.
That really looked like something that we really don't do in the modern day. Look like something from the old world. Grand Avenue Temple here in the Grand Avenue building adjacent. We have an opera house, and again we have a drawing of the opera house, and then we have a scaled down version. Let's see how much more ornate this one is. And we have an even more scaled down version of it in photograph form. So down through time, where they're taking the eye-catching features of these structures off, I think in an effort to hide the old world. We see it time and time again in this research. And if you haven't really looked into the old world, and this is the first video you've watched, and you're wondering what the heck I'm talking about, I certainly suggest you check out more videos on the subject, because this thing goes deep, and it really, the implications are very, very very intense, I guess, for us to what actually happened here and who we actually are. And I don't think it's something that should be cast aside lightly. I think it needs to be deeply investigated. So these are a couple of the hospitals again. You get the gargoyles coming off the hospital towers. Why? To ask the question why. So many of these old, massive structures with the horse and buggies and the early automobiles. So many of them. The sheer volume should be enough to get you scratching your head, let alone how ornately decorated they are, or on the inside and the outside. A lot of them, we have no visual evidence of what they once looked like on the interior This is the Midland Hotel. And so many of them, if they still stand, have been heavily renovated. This one giving a bit of a taste of what the Midland Hotel looked like on the interior. And sometimes it's all you have is a postcard. This one's from 1906, it looks like. Does that make sense to you? You know, the early days of electricity and automobiles not really coming around yet, and you have all this amazing architecture. And another version of the Midland Hotel. I'm not sure. Again, we're already seeing a scaling back from here to the previous photo. I'll roll through some of these for you. The Mulebach Hotel. Let's see a little bit more information. Hotel Mulebach. And let's just poke a hole in the timeline here. Property of this site was supposed to be a First Baptist church. It was first acquired in 1914 by this Mulebach family. They demolished the church in 1914, and they built a 12-story, 144-foot high brown brick hotel at a cost of $2 million. This hotel opened in May 1915. So they had time to demolish a church and build this structure in less than a year and a half. Why the lie, folks? There we have the Mulebach photograph, just to give you a sense of how large this structure is. It's funny. To me, it's very laughable. I've seen enough of this to know how laughable it is. And I'm sure most of these will have a similar narrative, if any, if they have any narrative at all. A little taste of the Phillips Hotel. Hotel President, showing you more of the flair, old world flair. Hotel Westgate, this is the previous one, we're being told. Turning into this one. Make of that what you will. Kansas City Power and Light Building. Looking like you could easily park some air travel dirigible at the top there. They'll call this Art Deco styling. A close-up of the details. Very interesting city. The Liberty Memorial, this having to do with World War I. Again, Hidden Truth does a great investigation of the rock walls surrounding this this structure, and then the evidence of fervent heat, he calls it, in the what was once what we would call man-made structure, looking now somewhere in between what we call natural and man-made. Very interesting. Very interesting. We have some sort of phoenix structures here on the side as well. See them up there. And I'm not sure if I jumped ahead. This is a Linwood Presbyterian. I have lost a photograph of the building. So this is supposedly in the church. This structure here. Interesting. The Loretto Academy. Not sure if that's a boarding school or what exactly it is. Go through a couple theaters. These entertainment venues, a large part of the old world, and you see many of them in many of the North American cities. And we'll keep moving until we'll get back to the theaters here. We have a lot of these have theaters in them as well, actually. And curious again, this is one of the temples. And this is one of the other temples. So we have two temples like this in Kansas City. And that should raise your eyebrow if you are following along. And we'll go back to the theaters, the Lowe's, Midland. And not looking like much on the outside, but here's the interior for you. Early 1900s. Easy to do, apparently. Angels in the architecture. Gold leaf everywhere. They'll say it's the Gilded Era. It's truly spectacular. We'll keep moving forward here, though, and get to the New York Life building. This one very special too, and I think I'm going to interject a clip from Hidden Truth on his boots in the ground right here.
So behind me here in Kansas City, we're about, I would say about a quarter mile from the river on the north end of the downtown, and behind me is the most incredible building. It actually reminds me of that building in San Francisco at the end of the tram in those old movies, if you've ever seen that. But I want to give you a close look at this. So the construction on this building is just incredible. The detail. Bottom, and just how far this building could have been covered up. If we look at the base, at least 3 or 4 stories straight down.
So that's pretty amazing to think. Supposedly this is built in 1 or 2 years, and it goes, 50 to 80 feet down below ground. Massive holes in the narrative, folks. Beautiful. Amazing structure. Let's keep moving forward though. There's the Board of Trade. There's the New York Life. Similar looking structures. Interesting here you see as well. Looking very mudded. This looking dug out. This looking like it's not or built upon. Very interesting. The Newman Theater. Take a look at some of the interior. Again with the beautiful arched ceilings. Decorations. The Orpheum. The Palisades. And I would be willing to wager we would see evidence of melt in here as well, post-Cataclysm. I mean, why? Maybe you're asking the question, why hide? Why hide the Cataclysm? Well, if that's a crucial element of your control over this realm, then it's a very simple answer, right? They're relying on us to remain ignorant of the fact that this happened. There's an old saying that we have to remember the flood in order to avoid repeating the process, the reset process. We have to remember, and I think that's what this research is seeking to do. This is the Progress Club, 1893. We are trying to encourage ourselves and those around us to remember. This is one of several libraries. We saw the Carnegie Library early on in this presentation. We have the Rialto building, 1909. They're being told. Again, you can see evidence of regrading going on here. Not making sense to build like this. We have this massive slope out the front of the building. And we'll keep moving forward. So much to show you in Kansas City. The Scarrett building again, we're seeing the same thing. Here we have a modern day look, and they're telling us that it's built in 1906. Why do they put the dates on the buildings? I think it's to solidify the timeline, to cement that into our consciousness. And then the lobby of that magnificent structure. So 1906 in Kansas City, this is how they built. They must have had a lot of hands on deck and a lot of skill available to them. And then you realize that every other city along that same timeline was supposedly doing the same thing. Yet we see very little evidence of the progress. We see very little bird's eye views of construction from that very early time period. It should be really a city with multiple massive structures going up at the same time. But that's not what we're seeing. The old Sears Roebuck, you see the Chicago, Philadelphia, Seattle, Dallas all having massive structures. The Second Church of Christ Scientist had to be torn down. it could have been a city hall. The Second Presbyterian. Some interesting features to Kansas City. And I felt it necessary to revisit this location and really do Kansas City justice as far as what I was able to research. The telephone building, Southwest Bell Telephone Building. Apparently this is the original, and then we're told they built on top of it to create this one. And they did that because they created a light form of concrete, and it allowed them to build without changing the substructure. Seems ridiculous to me. This apparently is some citizens on top of the building looking at the Zeppelin, the Graf Zeppelin going by. I assume from the 30s, probably. Coming to the end of the file now. We have the Tower Theatre, also known as Pantages, and this looks like it's been changed somewhat. Also known as the Fox, apparently. Quite the structure, though. Somebody's put an arrow in here pointing to that. Tech gone, of course, the tower. And then a couple train stations. The Union Depot. This would be the first one, they'll tell us. And you could see at an early time period some sort of demolition going on nearby. Won't be long for this one. And then we have the Union Station, Kansas City Union Station, which is a magnificent structure. We'll take a quick look at some of the interior. And I know Lucius Aurelian has done some work on this. I'll see if I can find his video and put that link in the description as well. His Kansas City video. And just giving you again a taste of the visuals of how they built in the early 1900s in Kansas City. Looking like it's built for a larger species in some ways. Almost looking like ants down there, reminding me of some of the other train stations. Penn Station in New York come to mind. Supposedly this is what it was going to look like, but I never got to that. You have to wonder, was it scaled back for us? Who knows? And we'll end it here with the old workhouse. Castle, Kansas City. What'd you think? Thanks for watching.